Well,
Good enough. All
yeah.
right. Start again. We just had little some technical difficulties.
Runaway mic.
Runaway mic. My mic was floating away like this.
I wouldn't mess with it.
Yeah, leave it alone.
Yeah, because
And I'm
it's
sporting a
doing it
white
again.
cable, and it's like super short. So, all right. So, welcome back to I don't know what we're calling it yet, but discussions with Hannah and Jordan. And we enjoyed the discussion that we had last week about the writing a note to your spouse every day. And we've been talking about doing something like this for a while.
Like at least a year.
Yeah, we've been talking about like,
I think it was when I was pregnant with Miles even, or before.
yeah. We've been talking about having more discussions like this and publishing them and broadcasting them to other people.
Can I just add, I say before I was pregnant with Miles, but it was probably actually when I was pregnant with one of the kids because we would spend 2 hours in the car together. No, 4 hours in the car together. Towards the ends of pregnancy once a week.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So it
so
just turned into
yeah, we
something.
really like having, somewhat lengthy intellectual discussions about, marriage and parenting and
Health.
and
Or just
wellness, financial increase, success, work, purpose, a bunch of stuff.
housework.
How we spend our time. I don't know. There's a bunch of different things, and they're all they're usually pretty useful discussions. I mean, we come out of them, feeling as a like we got something out of it. And for a while, we've been saying that we need to sit down and have these conversations.
We have them anyway.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like we sit down and have these conversations anyway, so might as well publish them. So it's not totally formal yet, but we're getting there. We might be formalizing it a little bit. We'll see.
Your camera got messed up again.
Well,
Right?
I centered the shelves up there.
Oh, I thought you were going to center the couch.
Well, then the shelves weren't centered.
Someone with green stuff is walking outside. You see that?
Yeah. Wonder what to do.
I don't know. It looked kind of weird though. Like, is it a neighbor or is it something else?
I don't know.
UFO?
Can't tell. It looks like a dog.
It did look like it was like in our yard. Yeah.
They're like in our yard pooping or something. All right. So anyways, we got a pretty good response from the last episode. I had several people, at least like 5 individuals, say that was cool and I got something out of it. So I was like, hey, like that's pretty neat. That's what we intended on doing is, putting something out there and, trying to help some people with, just some of the information that we've learned. And, it's not because we're experts on anything, but, we read a lot, we study a lot, we try things out, we experiment, and we try to figure out what works.
I think we're open to learning what could work better though. Like we'll talk about this, but like then if you were to come back like a week later and be like, oh, I actually thought of this instead, like it would be fine. Yep. We're like willing to change our minds.
Yeah. So we try to figure out what works best for us. And
I think mostly like it's not a thing to be like, you should do it the way we do it, but it's more of like questioning why you do what you do.
Yeah.
And so like if you could be inspired by a conversation and be like, I don't know, like maybe we aren't communicating well, but maybe I don't want to write a note. What could we do instead kind of thing?
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah, it's not like we're saying like, oh, this is the only way to do things. Yeah. But yeah, definitely like having those discussions about like, okay, how can we make this better? How can we do this better? Because usually there's a better way to do things.
But I feel like the topic you wanted to talk about tonight was something that we haven't formally discussed.
Yeah. So
I don't think.
We kind of wanted
to work through it, but
we
Are you laughing about your mic?
No, I was just laughing because like we intentionally did not discuss this topic.
So we don't know how it will go.
So yeah, you're seeing the whole thing.
The
So
thing is, just a forewarning, a lot of times I say stuff, I feel like that's sometimes radical, but I work through it. But it's my initial response to something and then actually thinking through it to
well,
figure out what I actually think.
you think through me usually,
Okay.
so I'm your sounding board. You say stuff, and then I'm like,
Well, mostly just because, like, I don't know.
yeah,
I see things very clearly as right or wrong, but
right,
that doesn't necessarily mean that's the best way,
right,
like, to do things. So,
right,
like, I might feel very strongly that something is the right
right.
thing.
And I usually bring some nuance and
Yeah. So
some
that's, I
opposing
guess all I'm
perspectives.
saying is
Yeah, yeah.
if something sounds radical, that doesn't mean that's exactly what I would think.
Anyway, so we don't even know like the formal topic like title, but what we wanted to talk about was leadership in the home.
Or like partnership, leadership,
Yeah, it's like leadership
collaboration,
and working towards um
or I guess just family.
well, so I would say leadership in the home because like you lead different parts of the home depending
Yeah.
on what your role is and how you
Mm-hmm.
how you do things. You know, like for us, I'm the primary financial
Breadwinner.
and you primarily take care of the kids. So like that's our roles, and that doesn't mean that like everybody has those roles.
Mm-hmm.
But within that, then there's leadership characteristics of how we dictate the home and things like that, and how we communicate to make things run better and to basically so there doesn't have to be a lot of communication about how things run because like you just know like okay this person's doing this thing, this person's doing this thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then bringing that all together
Into decision making, that too.
into decision making, and then working towards goals and things that you actually want to work towards
Mm-hmm.
as a family unit. And so yeah, that's yeah. So I don't know if you have any. Did you have any questions or anything like that? Usually, you want to kick off with a question because
Well, actually, I don't have a question, but I guess first out of the gate, after you just said that, I was thinking about.
turn off your notifications.
Sorry, I'm just.
Wow.
I don't. Okay. So, I think initially we were almost talking about leadership in the home as far as like husband and wife and like not submission, but almost submission. Like, I think the word submission is thrown around a lot, but like
Yeah,
not
like
necessarily understood what that means, or like it has a very negative connotation to it.
yeah,
But I guess one example I was going to bring up is like what you were saying is there's different areas where we each lead in the home. And
right.
so one area I was going to just bring up now is like child rearing / discipline / like that kind of stuff. I actually feel like I lead more in that area,
Mm-hmm.
mostly because I primarily listen to, not primarily listen to, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I listen to a lot of parenting podcasts.
Right.
I would say my primary reading material right now in this season of my life is child rearing books or just books to do with children.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm actually the one a lot of times making decisions around how we're going to parent, or not making decisions, but I come to you with my ideas and I come to you with what I've read. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I think this is a really good idea for us to implement.
Right.
And I'll still say, like, what do you think? But it's less of like that you have a contribution to that and more of like, oh, that sounds good. Like,
Yeah, and I
and
might
it's like,
have like an off the cuff idea, but it's
yeah,
usually I'm like like you've been
but like it would be, so I guess all that to say is that submission in the home doesn't always have to look like he makes every decision in our house.
right,
Like,
right,
because that would be weird if I'm the one reading all of this stuff and I'm doing my research and
yeah,
I'm like with the kids a
all the
lot.
time, yeah,
Yeah. And then he's like, well, I think you should do it this way, even though like maybe he's not with the kids in the morning or he's not
right,
putting the kids to bed. Not saying you don't, just like
yeah,
that kind of stuff. It would be weird for him to almost like give me advice in that area. if he's not consuming the content, if he's not doing
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. So I guess just right off the bat, that was something that came to my mind of like an
Right.
area where I am almost more not in control, but I tell you a lot about what I think and how I think we should do things.
Yep.
And I'm still very open to what you have to say. And if you were to tell me, like, no, I really don't think we should do that, like, I don't like that idea at all, I would totally be like, oh, okay, like,
Yep.
why not though?
Yep.
Like, I would still want to know why, which I
Hmm.
don't think is necessarily like a disrespect thing. It's more of just like getting into his head
Yeah.
and being like, okay, but why do you think that? Like, what was wrong with what I said, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the reverse is true too. I mean, I'm making a lot of financial decisions, business decisions,
Mm-hmm.
and I am very open with you, and I try to include you in on a lot of
Mm-hmm.
decisions that I make. And ultimately, I'm making the decisions, but I still come to you and be like, "Hey, like, does this sound like a good idea?" Like,
Like with the like our van purchase. Like, I didn't look anything into a van that we were going to buy. You
mhm,
know what I mean? Like, or like investing and stuff. But
yeah,
I also have not done any research on investing.
right,
Like, it would be silly of me to be like, are you sure that's the right
right,
thing when like you've obviously done the research and figured out.
yeah, yeah. And so I guess the point we're getting to is that there's a mutual respect for opinions and ideas from the other spouse, and
Mm-hmm.
I think at least for us, we find it useful to be open to the other person's ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay to have bad ideas, and it's okay to have good ideas, and it's good to have all the ideas out on the table. I mean, I tell you all the time, I'll front something. I'll be like, look, I mean, I have no idea if this is a good idea or not. And then I'll say the idea, and then sometimes it's great. You're like, oh, well, actually, that's a pretty interesting way of thinking of things. And then other times it's like, no, that's a terrible idea. Like you didn't think of this, 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 and this. So
I don't necessarily say terrible idea. I say I don't know if
you
that's
say
like
that's
a
an
great
awful
idea.
idea.
Okay, I do say awful,
You do
but
say awful.
I don't know if I actually say that
But like I also
either.
don't get offended because I know there are things that you think about that I don't think about, and then vice versa. There's things that I think about that you don't think about. So that's the I don't know. That's kind of the I don't know if it's like advice, but like that's how we do things, and it seems to work pretty well. We
I
have
think not everything has to be a joint decision. I guess is almost what we're coming
yeah,
to, and but it also doesn't need to all fall on one person.
right. It's like yeah, there's domains where like you know the person who's making the decisions because ultimately they're responsible for the outcomes. Because like with like discipline and stuff like that, like you said, you're with the kids more. So it's not
Hmm.
like every 10 minutes I'm coming in and like, disciplining the kids when
Yeah.
I'm working or something. Like
Hmm.
you're doing that. So like ultimately you're responsible for the outcome of those decisions. So like you should be making those decisions.
And I'm also trying to keep consistency with the kids. And so by me telling him
Right.
what I'm doing is actually informing him, like, hey, when you are with the kids or
Right.
when you're with us,
This is
this is what I've expected from them. And this is like what I'm doing with them.
yeah.
So can you help me with this? And like, we're working towards that common goal of the consistency and stuff.
Yep. Yep. So
Um, but like I said too, like it's not like I would shoot any idea down that you had with parenting. Like obviously I think a lot of your ideas are good when it comes to that stuff.
yeah, it's hit or miss.
Well, I feel like you don't really come to me with a lot of ideas with parenting.
Yeah. Sometimes I just know they're bad ideas. But a lot of times I don't really have creative ideas. That's the thing. I think when it depends on the information that you consume and stuff. If you're consuming a lot of different information, it's not like you like read one parenting book and you're like, oh, this is the only
Yeah.
way to do things. And so, but you read 4 or 5, 6 books, you listen to podcasts, you watch
Mhm.
YouTube videos, and then you kind of get this idea of like, oh, like this is kind of the way that I want to model our lives. I want to model it after like the way these people do things because
Mhm.
we want these outcomes for our kids. Maybe we want them to be really smart, you want them to be really athletic, or I don't know what you want for
Mhm.
your kids. But you can kind of pick and choose who you model your decisions after a little bit, and you can get
Mhm.
information from different sources and you can make decisions. And sometimes there's no model and you have to make up, your own plan, but it helps to get more information. And so because I'm not consuming a ton of different information on specifically like discipline and like parenting kids and things like that, um, I don't have as many creative ideas as to how to apply this to, specific situations for our children, because every situation is different, every kid's different. So you
Mhm.
have to adjust, and you have to, kind of tweak things depending on their personality and the way that they respond and things like that. Like with Finley, with you know any kind of physical discipline, he just does not handle it well. Like it emotionally just does not go well with him. If you put your hands on him at all, it's just like he breaks down, and it doesn't really uh sink in. Like if he did something wrong, and like if you give him like a little swat in the butt, like he just doesn't like that. But it doesn't like make him change his behavior at all.
Mm.
Whereas like physical isolation, like if you take him away from a situation like that,
He comes back with a much better attitude, but
right?
it's
But it's not like emotionally just like really bad for him. So there's different kids in different situations and things like that. um uh So yeah, I'm not sure what the point. I forget the point that I was making. The point that I was making is that there's I don't have all those creative ideas because I'm not consuming the information. You do have more creative ideas. You can have ideas that apply to specific situations for our kids. And as for me, like I'm consuming a lot of business stuff. I do consume a lot of like fatherhood type stuff, but it's mostly around like responsibility and discipline as a father, like
Mhm.
discipline, self-discipline as a father, and taking ownership, making decisions, being decisive, having purpose, things like that.
Mhm.
It's less about like, oh, I don't know, day to day. It's less about like day to day stuff, and it's more like higher level, like this is the way a father should be, this is the way a husband should be, this
Mhm.
is the way a disciplined man should be. So that's the type of stuff that I consume mostly.
I'll say another thing too. I would say we both do this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd say with a lot of the decisions that we make, we have weighed the pros and cons. So like, not too long ago, I was looking into like a reward system for our kids of to not just have discipline for bad behavior, but to reward for good behavior, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so rather than just being like, okay, this is a great idea, this is exactly what I'm going to do, like, to me, this makes so much sense. I actually went online and I read quite a few articles about the pros and cons to something like this, or like how to implement it well, and like all of this stuff, so that it wasn't like, I don't know. It was almost more of like a validation for why I came to the decision that I made, whether I wanted to do it or didn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, I didn't find a great solution, so I decided not to do it yet. And like maybe in the future, I'll find something that I like. But so I guess all I'm saying is like we come to each other pretty well informed with decisions that we might want to make.
Yeah, well, I thought we ultimately decided that a reward system was not good because there's certain behaviors that we want our kids to uh, emulate that should not require incentives to
Yes.
do. And
Yeah, that was actually another video you had sent me
yeah,
after I'd already decided that I didn't want to do it
right.
because a lot of stuff I was reading online kind of had more of a negative thing to say about it. And then you
Yeah.
also had sent me a
And
video.
then, yeah, I think the thing that ultimately that we figured out is that the way to get your kids to do the right thing is to do it with them
Mm-hmm.
when they're really young.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you want your kids to like pick up the house in the evening, then like you don't yell at them to like pick up the house or like pick up their mess. You help them pick up their mess. You show them what it,
Or you're not like, oh, you get ice cream if you pick up your mess. Like,
right.
that's not how life works.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In the real world, you have to do a lot of things that you probably don't really feel like doing, but if you don't do them, your life's going to be a mess. And.
And was the point, I can't remember now, but was the point of including them in it because it makes them feel like a part of,
Well,
I guess like it's giving them the purpose though, and like showing them, I forget
it's a couple
exactly
different
why.
things. It's a mutual respect thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's I'm not above this type of work,
Yeah.
and neither are you. So like
Mm-hmm.
we're both cleaning up these Legos. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not like I'm like over you saying like oh, you need to clean up the Legos while I do something more important.
Mm-hmm.
So we're both doing it. But then it was also um the nuance of like showing them how to do things.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is how I pick up Legos, and like I can show you a better way to do it so that it doesn't take as long, or like, it's easier to do. And over time they pick up they pick up on those things, and they're able to, emulate them better, and it makes it easier for them to understand, like, oh, this is only going to take me 30 seconds. It's not like, it's like, oh, like, and they're just,
Yeah.
you're bantering with them all night trying to get them done. It's just like, oh, like, this is actually
And then there's a lot of negative feelings around that stuff too, I feel like. If
right.
it's a
Like, if you're just
constant
yelling at them
battle.
constantly to be like, oh, clean up these Legos,
Yeah.
rather than just like getting down there and doing it with them, then then you're right, like you said, there's a really negative connotation with like doing that task, and they would probably rather be doing whatever you're doing and spending time with you and doing things with you. And then at the end of the day, ultimately, it is just spending time with your kids. So that was to me made a lot of sense, and it gave me really good clarity. And that's why I had watched it in a video, and I'd sent it to you, and I think that made a lot of sense.
And I think too, this is a little bit not to do with this, but just to kind of go along with why I chose not to do it. I had actually I was reading a book as well. And I think I was reading a book, and maybe I was also, I had listened to a podcast as well. There was a few things that kind of backed up this whole thing, but teaching your kids how to serve as well. And so it still wasn't a reward system, but it was like talking about serving number one people in your family. So really teaching them like maybe Finley would choose a day that's like a surprise to Maeve and do a job that she's supposed to do, or like do something to serve her that's out of his way. And it's not a physical reward that he's going to get, but it's still like something like, number one, he can see how happy it makes her. He can see like, wow, I'm helping out, and like I'm serving someone else. And it's those acts of service, which is actually really important for a lot of other areas of your life, not just in the family, but then it can teach him how to serve his future wife. It can teach him how to serve his kids if he ever has kids in the future. Can teach you how to serve at your job or your church or something like that. So ultimately, that's what I had decided was that after. And so as you can see from that decision, though, it wasn't just my decision. Like you then started looking more into it or stumbled across it. I don't know, but it wasn't like.
I think Google
probably
spied it in our conversation and
Yeah.
sent me that video just to.
So anyway, just I guess in that sense, though, is like I was still open to hearing what you had to say. And then I had also told you some of my ideas and stuff like that. Cause like, I think I was still kind of on the fence. Cause like,
Well, and and it helps to have the multiple perspectives, because you can just look at them and be like, this is clearly the better decision, because this ultimately gets the thing that we want our kids to be like,
And so I would say that too is something that we try not to do, is to rush into decisions and implement things right away. So like I could have that night printed out these reward charts and like been like, well, let's just try it for 2 weeks. But like, number one, sometimes it's better not to try it and actually think about it and think about possible outcomes, in my opinion, than to try to get everyone on board and then have it be a failure, or be like, oh, never mind, next week we're actually trying something different. Like you should, it's kind of that thing of like, let your yes be yes and your no, no, where when you come to a decision, you should be pretty solid in that decision. Yes, I do think there's trial and error. And so I do think some ideas should just be ditched even after trying them. But ultimately, I think you should try to be as solid as you can in your decisions, especially when it surrounds your kids. But even with us, like, I feel like decisions that you make around your business, it can be really difficult for me if one week you say this thing, and then the next week you're like, you know what? Actually, I decided I'm not going to do that. This is actually the route I want to go. And like, even to me, that's really hard sometimes and confusing, because I'm like, man, like I was getting on board with this other decision that he had made, and now I'm like trying to wrap my head around this decision that he wants to do. So like, I think that's just a really important thing in general, is to be almost like decisive, but decisive in a sense that you can still have time to think about it. And you don't have to make
it's decisive,
quick and hasty decisions.
decisive after you've thought about it.
Yeah. And maybe not getting other opinions, as far as like going to all of your friends and being like, well, what do you think if I do this? Like all of those people have different situations and different kids. It's kind of trying to get an unbiased perspective.
Well, like I said, you want to get the perspective of the the people that have the outcome that you desire.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's all types of people, and they all have different priorities, and they all have different situations. And so, I think one of the, um, I forget the exact quote, but it's basically like, don't take advice from somebody you don't want to be like.
Yeah.
Like, never take advice from
Yeah.
somebody you don't, because it's true. Like, if you don't actually want to be what that person is, then like, why would you actually
Oh,
take
so
advice
it's
from them?
like we've talked about this before. Maybe you don't like this example, but let's say like an Elon Musk. Like
Yeah,
you wouldn't
right,
be taking like marriage advice from Elon Musk,
right.
but you might take other advice from him that could be useful for you. But like
Yeah,
if like his marriage is not like, even though he's like doing really cool things and you think of him as a very smart and intelligent person,
right,
that doesn't mean that you would take advice in every area of your life from
right.
him.
I don't, and ultimately, I probably wouldn't take hardly any
Yeah.
advice because
Your situation is
I don't
also very
want
different.
to emulate that life,
Yeah.
like, it's
You know what I meant though?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
if you had a business
mhm,
question or if you had something like that,
yeah,
that's someone that you would trust more
mhm,
than, let's say,
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. Well, the other thing too, and I think we're getting a little off topic, but
Yeah.
one thing I'll say is that um, it's so much more important to observe what people actually do rather than what they say,
Mhm.
um, because uh, people can have very good intentions with their advice and like
Mhm.
the things that they say, but like if they don't actually do that thing, day in, day out or something, then like that it basically is meaningless advice. But then also, there's a lot of people that don't give advice that have really like have the exact thing that you want,
Mhm.
and all you have to do is pay attention to what they do, watch what they do
Mhm.
instead of what they say, and you'll be able to have a blueprint for how to get to whatever that person's doing.
I'd say it sounds off topic, but I honestly think it's very much on topic because I think the reason we're able to have this mutual respect is because I deeply and genuinely respect the decisions and ideas that you have because I know the thought process that goes into it. And so I guess the whole backstory to this is like how to make good decisions so that you can be trustworthy and so that you can be someone that is respectable and that
Hmm.
can be respected, and you know that you're not wishy-washy, and you know that you're not like one day you want to do this and then the next day you want to do this, and like no one can really trust what you say. Or maybe your husband is like that and it's hard for the wife to get on board and be like, well, how am I supposed to back him up when he's changing his mind
Hmm.
every 5 minutes, you
Right.
know?
Right.
um and so that's why, like, ultimately I think this is almost a starting point of knowing how to make good decisions and coming to good conclusions with things, and also how to communicate that to your spouse.
Yep.
Because I do think there's one, like a certain level of respect where where I could honor what you have to say with no questions asked. But
Right.
I also think it's really cool for you to be able to share your thought process behind decisions because it can make me get on board all the more.
Right.
Like, obviously, I should support you no matter what,
Yeah.
but like being able to know what went into that decision can also be helpful.
Yep.
Not necessary, but helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think so the way I'll tie this into like the leadership in the home type thing is so the way that we run our home is that like typically I'll make more, like kind of like larger life decisions. And it's not that like I'm making every single decision, but I it's a little nuanced because like obviously you have input too, but like where we live, like the type of work that I do,
Mhm.
like the lifestyle that we have, how we spend our time is mostly dictated by like my path to where we
It's
want to
okay.
go.
You can say it. Like, I'm not
No,
going to be I was actually going to say that I think y- I actually let's say like there is a stressful situation, I actually look to you to make a decision because I know that you make very wise decisions in stressful situations.
yeah.
And not saying that, but I guess my point is like you're very unemotional when it comes to decision making. So
Mhm.
you can take a lot of the emotion out of it and make a very logical decision
Yeah.
and really weigh the pros and cons and do it well. And
Yeah.
you're not quick to answer a lot of my questions. You actually take your time to answer it. And so I guess all I'm saying is I respect that not only that, but I think, sorry, this isn't just another thought popped in my head. Honestly, if you think about it too, like the responsibility then for things actually falls on Jordan's shoulders. Like if that's the
Right. It's
decision that he made,
ownership and
that is the
responsibility.
responsibility that, and so sometimes
Right.
it's easier for me to just be like, Jordan, I
Make
don't want to make this decision.
make
I
this
don't want
decision.
the consequences.
Yeah.
Like
You're responsible for it. Yeah.
you're responsible for this decision. And if
Mhm.
something goes wrong, obviously I'm going to back him up, but like it
Right.
falls on him ultimately, which is
Right.
a big responsibility. And are you ready to take that
Yeah, and I
on?
think so that's like the two things that I wanted to talk about, at least for like men.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're the,
Spouse.
if you're the, you know,
Oh,
if you bring in the income,
yeah.
you do the work, you're the husband, and you're a father. The two things that I wanted to say, at least as far as like making good decisions, is thinking long term,
Mm-hmm.
and then like what you said, like the complete ownership and complete responsibility.
You can't put it back on your wife for a decision that you made ultimately or on
Right.
anyone else.
Yeah. And like if and so part so I'll start with like the ownership part. So like part of that is becoming knowledgeable about the realm, the domains that you have responsibility over, and having the knowledge that you need, having the tools that you need, having the time that you need to make good decisions, and have the time that you need to be able to put in the work to be able to, progress towards whatever you're trying to get to. Um and that's all part of ownership. Ownership isn't just like, oh, like I make the decisions. It's I actually care about this thing and I'm going to see it through that it gets to the point where I need it to get to. And then the long term,
Wait, can I say one more thing in
sure.
regards to that?
Yeah.
So, one thing I'll say too is that let's say when it comes to a budget, so your area is not necessarily grocery shopping or buying stuff for the house, but you still somewhat set the budget.
Yeah.
But you didn't do that. You didn't throw a number at me and lowball me and be like, well, this is how much I think you should be spending.
Right.
This is how much you can spend.
Right.
We actually sat down and I told him about how much diapers and wipes cost and about how much like all of this stuff cost. And he actually worked with me and like gave me extra to compensate in case something else came up. So like,
Yeah.
within that, I guess all I'm saying is like you were saying being knowledgeable about your realm. So even though your realm is budget and your realm isn't grocery shopping, you are still knowledgeable about grocery shopping enough to know
Yeah.
what a decent budget looked like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and that's also like, that's something that's a high priority to us. Like
Mhm.
we would much rather spend a lot on groceries than other things
Yeah.
because we know that.
But that was just an example. It's just
Yep.
like
Yep.
you don't just throw things out willy-nilly and expect me to like
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I don't know. I guess that's all I'm
yeah.
saying is like that's a respectable thing in my opinion is that you took time to actually see how much stuff cost and not just and that's just one area is all I'm saying cuz like that area overlaps with other areas that maybe you're not in charge of
Right.
necessarily,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and so like because I own, the financial decisions, it's up to me to make those decisions. And when I don't make those decisions, it's confusing. Like if
Mhm.
I don't sit down every week, like if I skip a week where it's just like, okay, all of our paycheck just went to the checking account and like it's just there. And if I don't allocate it to where it needs to go, if I don't, put it in different places, then it usually just gets spent.
Mhm.
And then at the end of the week, we're like, well, wait a minute, like we needed money for this and money for this. And you get frustrated because like you're like, well, the money was there. Like
You didn't tell me
that's
that
the
like you
policy.
had
If the money's there, then
well, the policy is
it's
kind of like you normally inform me about
yeah,
where you put stuff each week and then how much I have left.
right,
And when you don't do that, it's kind of like, well, I needed to get this stuff.
right,
And it was there.
right. And so like part of ownership is maintenance,
Mhm.
and it's keeping up on things, and that applies to any other realms too. It's your marriage, it's your kids, it's your home, it's your business. Like all of these things require routine maintenance, attention, and you physically being present and competent and showing up every day and managing these things and maintaining these things. And so like that to me is like um I don't know. It's a perspective that I feel like there's a lot of people that don't have that perspective, where they kind of
Maintenance.
just like they just push responsibility to other people.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I'm having marriage issues. Like, let's go talk to a counselor. Like
Mm.
we'll push the responsibility off to them. If they can't fix us, then
Then it's their fault.
it's their fault. Like they didn't help us enough. Or it's finances or like business. It's like, oh, the market's down, business isn't good.
Or
It's
I
like,
just don't make enough money, or
yeah, something like that. But it's like, no, like you can make decisions and you can take action and you can actually make things happen differently. And you can change your circumstances. And so like when you actually take ownership and you actually take responsibility for things, then it allows you to actually make effective decisions because you're actually taking control of things and moving in a direction. So I think that's a really key thing to, I don't know, just keep in mind and like use, something to practice is just like taking extreme ownership. And that's a book that,
I think I read that book.
yeah. Are you doing a little Hydro Flask sponsorship?
No, it's
Hydro
just
Flask,
that
if you
it
want to
sounds
sponsor
like your
us.
voice is already getting like,
Oh yeah, well,
I need to keep coughing. So
um, so the second thing, what was the second thing? You remember?
if you give me a minute.
Oh, I was thinking long term.
Yeah.
So, ultimately, the best decisions that you can make are decisions that align with the long-term goal that you want to achieve. And so, if you think about like something like nutrition, right? Like, in the short term, so like if you're only making short-term decisions, you're trying to basically like appease your emotions and you're only thinking about like what's happening right now. And so like, it's 10 o'clock at night, feeling a little hungry,
Kids are in
bed, might grab some ice cream, and just like, calorie up. And, it's a very short-term decision because like right now it makes you feel good and that's cool. But long term, maybe your goal is in the next year or two, like I want to cut down, number of pounds or something like that, or like, I want to
cut down on sugar. I don't know.
yeah, or it's like I want to run a marathon or something like that, like, and so like when you only make short term decisions, you're basically appealing to your emotions, and when you're making long term decisions, you're actually appealing to logic and what actually is a better decision for who you want to be in the future. Because I believe ultimately you can completely change who you are in a very short amount of time if you continually are aligning yourself with who you want to be in the future. And if you're only ever appeasing who you are now and just like making decisions about, how you feel right now, maybe you feel depressed, maybe you feel, you know, super happy and you want to celebrate and you want to like go out and get drinks or something, like there's a lot of different emotions. Um, and if you're only ever appealing to those emotions, then you're just going to make short-term decisions and you're never going to actually make real progress towards anything. Whereas if you're making long-term decisions, and you're thinking about like, oh, like in the future, this is the type of person that I want to be, then you're going to make better decisions. And so like, it's like financially, like it's like, it's investing, it's saving money, not spending all of your money because you feel like buying stuff right now. In business, it's not reacting really quickly to things. It's thinking long term and being like, no, this is the type of product that I want to build. This is the type of customer that I want to serve. It doesn't matter what's happening right now. I know what's valuable. I know what can help these people. I'm going to build that thing and I'm going to do it, and it's going to take me this much time. And it doesn't really matter what other people are saying. Like, this is the direction I'm going. And I don't know, there's a lot of different areas. I mean, even in your marriage, things can happen and trust can be broken and, or, maybe you just like are having problems communicating and stuff like that. And if you only ever pay attention to how you feel, it's like, I feel like there's a lot of tension. I feel like you're upset and like it can just be bad. Whereas if you're thinking long term and you're like, wait a minute, like I actually want to have a good marriage, then maybe you're going to be a little more patient. Maybe you're going to have a little more grace. Maybe you're actually going to sit down and listen and consider what the other person is saying. So, that's actually, so I have a third thing. So those.
Wait, I have something to say with the long term thing though.
Okay, yeah, sure, go ahead.
I feel like with the short term stuff, typically, short term thinking is panicky,
Yeah.
where at least I think with business, not necessarily with like health and stuff, but like with business and other areas, sometimes if you see something going downhill, it's like a panicked decision, which is typically a short term decision, in my opinion.
Yep.
Long term decisions, I think, are pretty well thought out.
Yep.
Or the short term decisions, from my experience, do not take very much self discipline.
Right.
And the long term decisions take tons of self discipline,
Right.
which I feel like I've seen tons of improvement on in you, where like I do think you would want to like ignore things or not deal with them or think that it's not that bad and that you can just keep doing what you're doing and it's all going to be fine, or just not think about it. I don't know. Like, I guess all I'm saying is I think I've noticed that when you keep the long term decision like the forefront for you, like you keep the long term in mind,
Right.
then what I've noticed with you is it's easier for you to have self discipline. Because I don't think
Yeah.
that was your strong suit getting married.
Right. Right.
Like, I would say in every area, really.
Yep.
In a lot of areas, you just, I don't know.
Yep.
It was kind of just whatever you felt like doing or what you felt like you had the energy to do or
Yep.
something like that.
Yeah, and part of this is, what we talk about a lot is like
That battery's low.
Yeah, and I was just looking at that.
Okay.
Should we pause and
Yeah, I mean, you can just edit.
all right, yeah, I'll cut. All right, we're back. Laptop was dying. We will get a better setup someday, but right now is not that day. So yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I was a little distracted when you were saying that, but I agree in terms of like self-discipline and things like that. There's two things. So like, yes, like keeping that like long-term goal at the forefront of your mind, whether it's like writing it down consistently or having it pinned up on the wall somewhere, or like, just somewhere where you can see it all the time and knowing that that's what you're working towards. I think that helps people make good decisions.
What helped you? Was it just
It was writing every day. So every day for a long time, I was writing who I wanted to be and the thing that I wanted to
Yeah, I
build.
do remember that actually.
Yeah, and so that helped me just really wrap my mind around like, okay, this is the direction you're going.
Because I feel like the more you got that, like, because there was stuff that like we struggled with in our marriage, and I feel like the more you wrote about like the husband that you wanted to be,
Right.
like the more it almost like sunk into you,
Right.
and it became so real to you that you were like, I don't want to lose this.
You
Like,
become
I
that
don't
person.
want to like,
Yeah, you become that person.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I think it sunk into like how much of a loss it would be, or like not even a loss, but like what your life would be like.
Yeah.
If it wasn't the way that you like wanted it to be almost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I would say the
And it's
second,
the same with the kids though.
yeah,
We talk like
oh yeah, 100%, yeah,
we think and we write a lot about who we want our kids to be.
right.
Not like exactly who we want them to be, obviously, but the traits that we want to instill in
The
them.
character that I think we want them to have and things, yeah.
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 Sorry, I was
No,
interrupted.
it's okay. And then the next thing is something that I like to talk about. Now we both talk about it, is like that definiteness of purpose. Like if you don't actually have a purpose and like a reason why you get up every day and you like serve other people and like people things depend on you showing up and doing something. Like if you don't have something depending on you like that, then it's hard to make good decisions because like your decisions don't matter, like you can't actually make effective decisions. But like when you have definiteness of purpose where like exactly who you are and the thing that you're doing, the thing that you're building, then that helps you make more long-term decisions, because like the direction that you're going. Whereas if you have no purpose, then you're just going to make short-term decisions because it doesn't really matter. You're just floating around doing nothing.
Well, I feel like I hear you talk about that all the time, but the way you just said it actually like was kind of eye-opening because you've always said it in terms of men
Mm-hmm.
and you like jobs, but I feel like okay, so I think I realized that subconsciously that my definite of purpose was the kids.
Mm-hmm.
But for a while I floated around not really knowing what I was supposed to be doing, like
Mm-hmm.
cuz like I was into watercoloring for a while. I was into like lettering and stuff. And we had talked about making that a business and stuff.
Yeah.
And so during that time, it was so hard to
To do the
maintain my
kids.
cool
Yeah.
and like be patient with the kids
Right.
when I felt like what you wanted me to do was like this business. And I felt like what I wanted to spend my time doing was like making my skills better and like doing all of this stuff.
hmm
And then when I finally decided that like that's all second and that doesn't actually matter. And this goes back to the long-term decisions. I feel like you spoke so much into my life about the value of being a mom.
Yeah.
Like I actually feel like that's what changed my mind about it.
Yeah.
Like I heard you say over and over and over again, like, no, you should not be doing anything else. Like
hmm
your job is so much more important than anyone else. And like not to like you weren't trying to flatter me. You weren't trying to like even manipulate like you none of that. It was truly what you believed and thought and wanted for our family. And you told me that like I feel like it was constantly.
Yeah.
Looking back,
Yeah.
I don't think in the moment I realized what was happening. And then like it just kind of flipped at one point because I think I stopped doing a lot of that stuff and I would wake up feeling like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And it was a flip that was just like, you know what? It also goes back to the ownership. I was taking ownership of how my kids were going to turn out.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
was like, this is so important. And like, this is my job. And if my kids turn out a certain way, I can't put that on anyone else. Like,
hmm
if my kids turn out this way because I decided that I wanted to do a business and nothing against people that want to do a business, but you're saying this definite of purpose. And I took sole responsibility and ownership of that. That's when I started consuming the podcast. That's when I started
Right.
consuming these books. And it was like almost like this addicting thing of like, I'm going to do the best job that I can do because now I know this is exactly what I want to be doing.
Yep.
Like, this is like, and I felt like I had your full support and you kept talking and saying that encouragement and that like how important it was and how much you valued what I was doing. And like it's almost making me emotional thinking about it
Yeah.
now, but like mostly because I didn't realize that was what was happening. But I think you can attest to the fact that I was pretty miserable.
hmm
Like I wasn't happy with what I was doing. I would wake up and not I'd get frustrated with you for not giving me time to like do the thing that I thought I was supposed to be doing, which was watercoloring when in reality what I was supposed to be doing was just spending time with the kids.
Right.
And like,
Yep.
and like I'm glad I realized that sooner rather than later. And I'm glad that I think it changed when you were also writing about yourself and like who you wanted to be and you realized who you wanted me to be. And I think that's part of what we've talked about a lot is like the man, not that you're responsible for how the woman turns out, but at the same time, your words and your actions do so much to shape your wife.
hmm
And the same can be said for the wife and the husband.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Every successful
yeah,
husband has a
but
great wife behind them. Yeah.
it's just, I don't know.
The
To
one.
me, just the way that you said that was so eye-opening. I was like,
The
man, that's kind of
I think the
crazy.
key word was when I said that it's like something depending on you.
Yes.
Like that is your response. That's your purpose.
Like I felt like, okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Like,
Because like for me, it's like my customers. I have
yes.
thousands of people that depend on me showing up and making sure this thing works,
Uh-huh.
and then that's why they pay me, and that's and
Yeah.
I know that that's a big part of my purpose is to make sure that that thing
But I feel like
happens.
even just like now that we've discussed that, like waking up tomorrow is going to be so much better because it's like, man, this is like, but I'm being serious.
Yeah,
Like
no,
it's
it
just
feels
kind of like
good.
a really cool thing of like, this is my purpose.
Yeah,
This is what I'm supposed to be doing.
yeah.
Like,
Well, I will say, even just like logically though, like with your children, it is a very long term decision, but it's like at the end of the day, like you have your kids under your roof for 20 years, and then they are still your kids for the next 60 years,
oh yeah.
and like
Mhm.
you have 20 years to build the person that you were going to spend the next 60 years of your life with, or you're not going to spend time with them
Yeah.
because they're awful. So like logically, it's one of the most important things that you can do is to raise successful and good children. Um, there's two reasons that, and then also the number of people that they're going to impact and that they're going to positively impact if you
Mhm.
raise really great children that actually are intelligent and successful and they can bless other people, they can give to other people, they can share with other people, they
Mhm.
can help other people. And you're doing that. Right now we have 4 kids, so that's 4 times over. All of the people that they impact positively directly correlates back to you and the decisions that you made and the
Mhm.
responsibility that you took. And so, like, even logically, it makes great sense to prioritize, uh, you know, having great children and prioritize spending time doing that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
And I would like to talk about that in another thing. There's the book I read, like 50 things you
Oh,
should
yeah,
teach
yeah.
your
Yeah, that's a good one.
kids before they move out. But
Yeah.
like it was really good about like having a plan for child rearing
Yeah.
and how you're raising them. But that I feel like that's a whole different topic.
So
That
I've thrown out a lot of numbers, but I know that the third thing, so there was ownership, thinking long term. The third thing is that um, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about you and the decisions that you're making for your family.
hmm
Um, and I'll nuance that with, it matters the people that you want to become. It matters what they say and what they think. Um,
But even that does
but
it.
even then, still, it doesn't really matter. Like, ultimately, it's up to you and your spouse to decide who you want to be, the goals that you want to achieve, and the place that you want to work towards. And it's going to be different for everyone.
hmm
So why would you, like, it's the kind of like that keeping up with the Joneses mentality. It's like, oh, you're looking around, seeing what other people have, and like, what are they, and
Or
and
like, what are they doing? Or
yeah,
like,
yeah. Or like somebody might
um,
judge you for a long-term decision that you're making. It's like, oh, I'm not going to drink alcohol today. It's like, oh, like, oh, have fun for once. It's like, well, no, like, this is the type of person that I want to become. And I'm not going to get there if I keep making these short-term decisions.
yeah,
And so it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about your decisions, unless you're like harming yourself and other people, which is a totally different type of decision.
yeah. I feel like, I
But like,
mean,
if you're
that's
making good decisions that are healthy and they're beneficial and they're working towards the person that you want to become, then ultimately that's what that's what you should focus on. You shouldn't focus on like what other people want for your life necessarily.
mhm.
And I mean, like, if you're a kid, then like it's different. Like, your parents, they want the best for you or whatever. But even now, like,
You would
as
hope.
adults,
Yeah.
your parents still want the best for you, but they might not have the best decisions for you because they don't ultimately know exactly who you want to become and what you want to
Yeah.
push towards. And so it's up to you and your spouse. We're talking about like families and stuff like that. It's up to you and your spouse to decide, okay, this is how our family is going to work. You know, this is how, who you're working towards is who I'm working towards. This is who our family is working towards. And then making decisions that align with that and, working towards whatever that is. Maybe you want to be, super wealthy. Well, then you're going to have to make some different decisions because, whoever's making the money has got to spend a lot of time working.
Yeah.
Or maybe you just want to prioritize quality time. And it's like, okay, well, then you can't have a bunch of obligations taking up all your time because then you can't spend quality time,
Mhm.
with your family or something like that. So depending on what you want, the outcomes that you want, and the, um, you know, just the goals that you're trying to work towards helps you make, those decisions. But ultimately, you should make those decisions for yourself. And it's okay to get like other people's, like, obviously, like, if you're watching this, like, you're hearing what we think.
Mhm.
um, but ultimately, we're telling you, don't just do what we say. Like, figure out what works for you. Figure out what goals you want to achieve, and then get after it. And make those decisions. Take ownership, and actually work towards that thing. And you're going to be much happier
Mhm.
because of it.
Yeah. Um. So that was a lot about like, I feel like why we both respect each other's decisions, but I don't know if there's anything you want to talk about in regards to like, so obviously like we are
You're talking like the
Christians.
leadership dynamic and
Yeah,
everything.
so like we
Well,
follow biblical principles or
yeah,
try to about
yeah, but yeah, like,
how the Bible
yeah, the
instituted things
Bible
in the family.
is pretty clear about, the man being the leader of the home,
hmm
and, the wife is, submissive to the man. And it's not submissive, like we talked about in the beginning, it's not submissive where like the man makes every single decision and like, yada, yada.
At least from our understanding.
But what I was going to say, the reason why I talked about all of the long-term things and stuff like that, and the ownership and things like that, is because if you lack those things, then the dynamic is totally off.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you'll see this where the men have no responsibility. They don't think long term at all. They're making short term decisions. They're destroying their lives. And the women have to step up and make these long-term decisions and make these selfless decisions to keep the family together or to keep things moving forward. And the men are just off doing their own thing. Maybe they go to work, but they're doing minimal work, and then they come home and they do nothing. And they're not maintaining their marriage, they're not interacting with their kids. And so that's where the balance is off. And that's where, families fall apart. But I will say, if the man actually has true responsibility, true ownership, true long term thinking, and is only making decisions that matter to you and your family, then the dynamic works because the man can take that responsibility and they can take all that on their shoulders and they can actually execute on it. Whereas if the dynamic is off and the man doesn't doing anything, then the woman does have to step up if they want it to work. If they want something to work, then the woman does have to step up and make those decisions. And I feel like you see that a lot. And I don't feel like you see it as much the other way, where the woman is like totally unresponsible. Like usually they have a level of responsibility, especially when you have kids. Like usually the mom at least has a level of responsibility for taking care of the kids
Normally, yeah.
and like, and executing on that. So yeah, I think that was my tie-in for like the leadership in the home thing. So like if the man has these qualities, then it's not even like a thing that's like controversial, because like the man is actually making good decisions. So like why does it matter who, like is the
And if the
leader of the
wife
home or
at
anything
that
like
point
that?
is not submissive or like submitting to that, then that's kind of on her, and that's a whole nother issue at that point.
Right. If I was making
That
long-term
then
decisions and you were making short-term decisions, then I'd be like, whoa, like this
yeah,
is
and
out of
that's
balance,
still though like because I do think there's also instances where it's hard to give up control, or you just think you know best as a woman. And so I think you say all of that, and that's true, but I do still think there can be dynamics where a woman wants to be in control. And I think that's where it's kind of taking it down a notch and just being like, I am trusting my husband.
Well,
God put,
it's not only that, but like you can help the husband make good decisions and good long-term decisions and help them understand, that's, ultimately the thing that they should be doing.
yeah, but like, let's say, I don't know, like with investing that I know nothing about, like, why would I have an opinion about that? Like, it would be about control, that I want to feel like I have a sense of control in where our money is going, even though, like, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah,
I
but I
guess
mean,
what I'm
like,
saying is like,
if that was a discussion that we had where you actually manage the finances and like,
yeah, but I'm saying
yeah,
if that's not the case, I think, and this is, we're talking in ideals. And I guess what I mean is like, in an ideal world, um, the woman would respect the man if he's making clear decisions.
yes,
But I don't actually think that's the case.
you know,
And
it's always true. Yeah.
no, I don't think so.
Hmm.
Because I do think there's still an element of, I don't know, maybe it is. I guess that's something I would have to think
Well,
through of like,
yeah, I mean,
if,
that's certainly something. We had the benefit of having a very similar moral background,
yeah,
and
I guess I'm just trying to think of instances where like, I
I
don't
think
know.
I think personally, so like I think that type of man is attractive to a woman,
Yeah.
and
And I
I
would
and
also
I
say,
and I think that level of responsibility and ownership and decision making attracts a type of woman that respects that
yeah,
and will actually operate under that.
that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, you have not always put up with, I say put up, and it's not in a bad sense. It's actually in a very good sense. You will call out behaviors that are almost like not productive in me.
Mhm.
So like, um, I don't know, you've always been very blunt with me, and you've always been very honest with me about like what you expect from me as well. And it's not like you're letting me walk all over you and do that stuff. Like you do still stand up for yourself, I guess is what I'm saying. And
Yeah,
like,
right.
does that make sense? Where like, I'm trying to think of the right words for it. Um, but I think when the man concedes control almost of certain things, and it's not control, like I feel like I'm
Well, it's
stumbling
the
over my
ownership.
words.
It's ownership and response. Yeah.
Yeah,
Who
I'm
owns
stumbling
this thing?
over my words, but I'm trying to get at the point where like I think it's been made clear to me what you also expect, and that you expect respect, number 1. And that like I can't talk to you in certain ways or you will call it out at me.
Mhm.
Because I think with certain behaviors, it can almost reverse that. And like if I were to talk to you in a very negative response, all of the time, or if I were to talk down to you, or if I'm starting to boss you around and like, do you know what I mean? Where it
Hmm.
can then make you almost feel weaker in that moment. And that's where that control, not control, that ownership starts to um flip
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
Where then I'm the one that's more in control and you're kind of like, I don't know how it got like this.
Hmm.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I'm saying is like this is an ideal world.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
so I think like there is respect and like how does that work? Because I think women can be disrespectful to men without realizing it and men won't always call it out or they might react but not be like, "Hey, I don't really like when you talk to me like that," or like
Yeah.
when you
Well,
say this
it's
to
a
me,
really
it makes me feel
yeah.
like you don't trust me or something like that. Instead, they might get mad or
Yeah.
like, get really quiet and just not say anything.
Right. Yeah, it's a really tricky thing, with the rise of feminism and things like that.
Mhm.
You know,
'Cause I'm not trying to say it like us women are evil. That's really not what I'm trying to say.
no, yeah, me
Um,
neither. Like, yeah,
I don't want it to be
we
like,
have complete mutual respect and we,
yeah, like
for
you
each
think
other
I'm
ideas
smart.
and stuff
You
like that.
think all of
Yeah.
this, but I also know given the opportunity, then sometimes I would make a choice to
Well,
I
so here's the thing, right? You- we laughed because we heard this the other day. Like, um, if you tell a woman she can make $2,000 an hour, she'll work 1 hour a week. If you tell a man he can work $2,000 an hour, he's going to work every single moment that he possibly can to, milk that opportunity. And so, like,
maybe it's not true for I like
no, that's true
we
for
laughed
no,
at it.
that's true for a lot of people. Um, but the point is that um, I think there's certain qualities about, you know, generic. We're talking like generics, and stereotypes of men that they should have ownership and responsibility of certain things, and the women should have ownership and responsibility of other things. Um, and with, like I was saying, like the rise of feminism, women are encroaching on the things that men are typically responsible for,
Mhm.
and it's causing confusion for men. And the men are more of the mindset like, okay, less responsibility is easy.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to be the one that works hard every day. I don't have to be the one that shows up every day and does all these things. I can just sit back. She's going to do all the work. Cool. You know?
Yeah.
And that's what you see with a lot of men. And that's why there's super high suicide rates now with men. There's tons of men that just like are on drugs all the time for depression and things like that because they have no ownership, they have no responsibility, they have no purpose. And it's not because the women, took all their opportunity and stuff like that. It's just they're um they're not viewed as the person that should be responsible for something. It's a little bit more of a mixed bag now where like, women are saying like, oh, like now I'm responsible for this. I'm the breadwinner and stuff like that. So it's an interesting
Because I
dynamic.
think the woman could still be the breadwinner and
Yeah.
it will still work
Oh yeah,
as
for sure.
long as there's
As long
still,
as you have purpose and you know what you're supposed to be
yes.
doing.
Yep. And
And
you're on the same page with it and
yeah,
on board
like I
with
would
it.
totally like if it was flipped and you made like a ton of money and like I had to stay home with the kids, I would totally do that, and I would do the best that I possibly could, and it'd be a lot of
I
fun.
mean, you did take the kids over for 4 days this week and had a
Yeah,
blast.
yeah, it was good. Yeah, and I knew my purpose for the week. I
I
didn't do
know.
any work.
I know.
I just watched the kids,
Yeah.
and it was fun. And so like yeah, like when you know what your purpose is, then like, but like if you're like say like you're you're married but like you don't have kids, and like the wife works and like she makes a bunch of money and like the man is like, but like like it's just there's this thing where like for men they need that ownership and responsibility to feel like they have a purpose and to actually show up and be a man that is responsible and that is
Mhm.
respectable.
Mhm.
And when they're not respectable men, then the woman's gonna walk all over them. And
Yeah, so like I guess
yeah.
I'm wondering because I feel like this actually wasn't always the case in our marriage either. And I mean, I think we still work on it because I think there's still times where I overstep sometimes
Hmm.
and want to have a control that I shouldn't have. If I'm being honest, like I actually do. I can't like call out specific instances necessarily, but like I know that's a tendency that I would want. more so I think when I think you're indecisive
Right. It's
is when
yeah. Well, it's
I
when you feel like you care more about something than I
mhm,
care about it or something like that.
mhm. I'm like, you don't even care about this. I'm just gonna make the decision then,
Right.
which isn't necessarily the right response. But so I guess my point is, or my question is, um, if you feel like your marriage was in a place where, let's say you're the man and you feel like your marriage is in a place where you're not able to make some of the leadership choices that you would like to be able to make, like how do you get that back in a loving way, or how can you
Yeah.
lead well then
Mhm.
and get back to the place where it's supposed to be
Yeah.
if it's gotten out of control,
You
or maybe it's certain little
mhm.
things, I don't know,
Yeah,
like.
you have to demonstrate trust and responsibility for small things.
But is there like a communication aspect too, where it's like, hey, I want to
The
like.
communication is the fruit of your efforts. It's if you it's just like moving up the ladder in a company. It's even though if you're at the bottom of the chain, if you take responsibility over this small task
Mhm.
and you do it well and you do something that, automates it or like you take full responsibility of it, they bump you up the ladder because you know how to take responsibility. And it's the same thing for like things that you've neglected. You don't come in and like just like I'm making every decision and I know exactly what I'm
Yeah.
doing. It's like no, like okay, we're gonna start here and we're gonna work towards this. And maybe it's with like the discipline thing and like maybe that's something I really want to take over or something. Then I have to be able to demonstrate to you that in a specific instance when I did this thing, it produced this result. And that's the result that we actually want. And so like that's how I can start to encroach on responsibility,
Mhm.
getting responsibility
But
back.
it's not like this dominion thing where it's
Yeah, it's not
like,
like I'm
you
demanding
need
like
to like get
I'm
out of
yeah,
here.
I'm making all the decisions. You need to stop. It's not like that. It's more like if you can demonstrate that by you taking responsibility of this thing that it's going to get better, then it's obvious who should be making the decisions
I
around it.
think that's what it happened in finances for us.
Yeah,
You, from the very beginning, said you would take care of finances
right,
and neglected it for a very long time.
right.
And I would nag you and I'd be like, hey, do you want me to take this over? Like, you're not really doing it. And
Right.
like, I don't want to do it, but like, I'll do it because like we need to do it. And I remember having those conversations
Yeah.
and you were adamant. You were like, no, I'm going to do it. Like,
Hmm.
I can do this. Like, I want to do this. I don't want you to have that responsibility. But it took you actually doing it for me to like actually trust you too.
Right.
Because like you told me so many times, like,
Right.
I'm going to do it. I'll do it.
Hmm.
No, I'm going to do it. And then like once you finally like in the notes started telling me like, oh, I already did this and this is how much you have and this is like instead of telling me you were going to do it, you just started doing it.
Right.
And I feel like I really like I don't know if you noticed this, but when you told me how much money I had for like certain things, I tried my hardest to be like, okay, I made this decision, like to
Yeah.
stay within
Stay
this.
in the
And I
budget.
would talk to you about it and I'd be like, yeah, like I didn't get this week because like this is how much you told me. Like I really tried to respect your decisions because you
Right.
took ownership of it and you
Right.
were like, okay, I already set this stuff aside. This is where it had to go
Hmm.
and you gave me that boundary
Yeah.
and it wasn't like I felt controlled in any sense. I actually felt a sense I true like I think even this is just eye opening. I feel a sense of relief
Right.
when you take
Because
those responsibilities
exactly. That's
over.
the way it should be. And that's the way
I know.
a functioning
But
marriage.
it's just like talking about it, like I don't think I always realize in the moment, like when it's happening, like what I feel like. But like it was a total sense of relief when you take that stuff over and it's not something that I'm like, oh, I could do it better. I'm gonna just take it over
Yeah, it's
now.
not even something you have to think about.
No, it
Yeah.
was literally like,
And
oh, I'm
that's
so
yeah.
thankful he took, and I think I thanked you for it too. I was like, thanks for like doing the finances. Like, I really appreciate it. I think
Yeah.
you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Like,
And that's the way a functioning marriage is supposed to be when
mhm.
when you actually take responsibility for things, it takes it off of the other person's plate.
Yeah,
I don't have to think about laundry.
because that stressed me out so much.
Like I've
Yeah,
never for the last I don't even know how many years. I don't
7 years.
like I
Actually, it might have even been when you were in college. I think I did your
I
laundry.
know like I mean I'll do it occasionally. Like it's not
Yeah.
like I don't know how to do laundry, but like
If
um
I asked you to, if I ask you to do something with laundry, you're good about it, or
Like
like
I'll get like my drawer will get like kind of empty, and I don't even like talk to Hannah because I know within the next day or two it's gonna get filled up again. Like she
it
has
just
she
magically fills
has
up.
that responsibility, but I don't have to think about it. So like I can spend more time thinking about my business.
Or if his drawers get messy, they magically get reorganized a
Magically.
couple weeks later.
Yeah, we have magic drawers that self-organize. But you know what I mean? Like but like even like with the kids, you know, it's a little bit mixed because like obviously like I have some responsibility too, but like especially when I'm working, like I don't have responsibility to kids. So like
You're
you
not,
have full responsibility, so I don't have to think all the time like, man, like I wonder what the kids are doing. Like I wonder if they're getting into
or I'm not
something.
coming out there and like, hey, you need to make breakfast for the kids now. Like
Right.
that's my responsibility.
Yeah.
Like that's not something you have to think
Yeah,
about,
and
and
we have
not something you want to think
Yeah.
about or take ownership of.
Right. We have agreed upon time where like I work
Yeah.
and like that's and that works. And then there's also an agreed upon time where I come in and help out with the kids that relieves you a little bit.
So I can do more housework type stuff, like catch up.
I help out with that housework too and stuff.
Well, normally it's like it's better because I'm quicker at housework if you watch the kids for a little bit of time so I can just do some housework and then we come back together.
Yeah. Yeah. But
anyways,
yeah, I think that's really it. Is like if you're my advice to the people out there is to take ownership and take responsibility for the things that you should have control over and push them in the right direction and actually and don't and that's so the opposite of that is blaming other people and pushing responsibility off to other people.
because if you blamed someone else for the finances
Right.
of like,
Yeah.
I would not trust you at all. I'm
Right.
sorry, but
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it just seems childish to
Right.
me.
So like you can't so like don't do that. So my advice is both take responsibility and do not push blame off to other people. Take full ownership, make good decisions, make good long-term decisions, and that's going to lead to a productive marriage. It's going to lead to a productive family, and you're going to be 40 years out from now looking back and just being like, man, like this is great. You know, we live a great life. And it's already been like that. I mean, and it's only been 7 years, but like even in the last 5 years, the progress that we've made, you look back at where you were 5 years ago.
I mean,
It's
I
pretty
definitely
wild.
like, it's not that we were miserable, but like, I feel like I genuinely enjoy being with you now and like working with you. And
Right.
I don't think that was always the case.
No. Not at all. Yeah.
And like that was us, like we had been together a long time before that, not married, but like,
Mhm.
I don't know, like
Yeah.
there's a lot to actually figure out.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the thing is like, I do think this conversation, a lot of, I mean, it's like you said, a lot of the responsibility I think falls on the man. And so it's almost hard to give advice to the woman to like submit. I don't like, it's hard to even know what to say to a woman to submit if the man is not actually making good decisions.
Yeah.
And so I guess like it is so crucial, number one, to find a good man
Yeah.
that you feel like, so before you get married,
Yeah.
find a good man that you are willing to submit to and that you are confident in his decision makings
Right.
and that you are confident that he has your best interest in mind, that when you have a future family, he is going to work hard. Like, figure out what his purpose is before you get married.
Yep.
Like, that's hard to do once you're married
Yep.
because you have so much more responsibility. So
Right.
like, it's a lot easier to figure out your purpose. It's different for women because sometimes you'll have children and stuff after getting married, so your purpose might change slightly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless you know that you want to have a family and you know that a job is just a short-term thing,
Mhm.
which is fine.
Yep.
But anyway, I guess that would be the advice is before you get married, make sure that the person you want to marry, you trust a lot
Mhm.
and that you can respect.
Yeah, and I think if you're already married and the man's not responsible,
Are there ways you can push him to be responsible?
Yeah,
Or
I'm just trying to think of
because you don't want to like take over.
Well, the thing you don't want to do is you don't want to nag. And that's what'll end up happening is like if a man's not taking responsibility, the woman will nag and they'll be like, "Oh, you need to do this, you need to do this,
'Cause,
you need
like,
to do this, you need to do this."
Yeah.
And I think it can be helpful sometimes. Like obviously sometimes a man needs to be reminded like, "Oh, like you're supposed to be doing this thing."
Yeah.
But if it's over and over and over again, then like clearly there's a responsibility issue. And it might take reminding them of things that they've said in the past, like, "Hey, you said this." It's almost like, like the Bible and like God, like,
Could it be though reminding them of who they're supposed to be?
yeah,
So like,
yeah,
because you talked, okay, so it was like in your instance where you kept telling me how important it was to be a mother.
yeah,
Like, is there a way to do that for your husband
yeah.
and be like,
I would say so. Yeah.
hey, like, remind him of who he's supposed to be, remind him of the man he was created to be and stuff,
Yeah.
and stand behind him? Because I don't necessarily think it's a good idea for you to take over responsibility in areas where he's lacking
Hmm.
necessarily. Because I think that could push him down further
Right.
to
It
not
it
want
makes
to make
yeah,
those
exactly.
decisions,
Yeah, it just pushes it even worse
right?
because then the man's not doing anything and then just goes downhill from there.
Yeah.
Um, I will.
Because I think that was part of it too, is I was trying to push you to figure out your purpose almost. Like,
Right.
I think we had this thing where we knew we had to make more money, but I think I asked you a lot, like, is this what you want to be doing long term?
Hmm.
Like, I would ask you a lot and be like, is this what you want to be doing for the rest of your life? Because I
Right.
ultimately want you to figure out what you want to be doing,
Right.
and I'm going to support you.
Right.
Like, but really asking those questions and finding that out.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I would say support is really helpful, or like that's really necessary too, because like it's like, say like a man doesn't have good responsibility in something, but he never gets like time to actually dedicate to something
Mm-hmm.
where he can actually sit down and focus and think. That's something
Or
where
like if he has a job and he doesn't like his job and wants to do something else, like a way to support him is to give him time to then
yeah,
delve into other things and figure out what he wants to do.
yeah. And
Not like,
informing him like, hey, like I'm giving you this time specifically so
and
you
I
can do this
expect
thing.
like you to also be responsible with that time and
Hmm.
do what you tell me you're going to do,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
play video games or
Right.
browse your phone or something.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. Yeah. And then as a man, it's up to you to deliver results and show them that you're being productive with your time and you're
Mhm.
actually doing the thing that you're
But
supposed
I
to be
think
doing.
showing him that you trust him could
Right.
be a crucial
Yeah. That
part
trust.
in.
Yeah. The trust is huge for sure.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't really have a ton of
I know, I'm
advice.
not saying like advice. I guess I'm just trying to figure out though, like,
Yeah.
if it's not the ideal,
Yeah.
how do you get it
How
to
does it,
be?
how does it flip flop?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's up to the man to just take ownership, take responsibility. It solves a lot of those issues.
Yeah.
And I think, and yeah, I think that's hugely, hugely important for men,
Hmm.
just for like all aspects of life, is to just take ownership and take responsibility.
It was kind of long,
Yeah.
but I don't know if you want to add what is it? The chapters and stuff to YouTube. I know you can do that if people want to skip around.
Yeah. We'll see. See how much editing I want to
Just
do.
say.
Yeah. I mean, I think that pretty well covers it. Like we said, we haven't talked about this before.
Yeah, and I don't ever want to be seen as like, this is how you do it. We know how to fix like a man who's not motivated and does like that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm
Yeah.
actually trying to figure out like useful things that you could do.
Yeah.
But I mean, each person is different. You actually don't know, but like
Hmm.
what is important to a man typically if he's somewhat decent
Yeah.
would be
Yep.
support and respect and stuff like that.
Yep.
I think I hear one of the kids, so
Is that Miles?
I think so.
All right. Cool.
So-
All right. We'll sign off. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you got something out of it. And we'll see you next week, probably.
Hopefully.
Sweet.